The Vethrani came on a Tuesday morning in spring. Maria Santos remembered this because she had been walking to work, enjoying the warm sun on her face when the sky went dark. She looked up and saw something that made no sense. A shadow covered the entire city. When her eyes adjusted, she saw it was not a cloud. It was a ship. A ship so large that it blocked out the sun itself. All around the world, people stopped what they were doing and looked up. In every major city on Earth, the same shadow fell. The Vethrani had sent 100 ships, and each one was larger than anything humans had ever built. They hung in the sky like mountains made of black metal, silent and terrible. For 3 hours, nothing happened. People stood in the streets and stared. Governments tried to contact the ships but received no response. Military forces moved into position, but everyone knew their weapons would be useless. "You cannot fight a mountain." Then the message came. It appeared on every screen, every phone, every device on the planet at the same time. The face that spoke was not human. The Vethrani had gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Their mouths were too wide, their teeth too sharp. But they spoke in perfect English, perfect Mandarin, perfect Spanish, every language at once. "You have 36 hours to surrender completely," the Vethrani said. "Your governments will transfer all power to us. Your military forces will lay down their weapons. Your people will prepare for their new purpose. If you refuse, we will destroy your species. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The message ended. The world erupted into chaos. Some governments wanted to fight. Others wanted to talk. A few tried to flee into bunkers deep underground. The Unified Council that represented Earth called an emergency meeting and sent a message back to the ships. They asked for time. They asked for dialogue. They asked what the Vethrani wanted. The Vethrani responded by firing a single weapon at the Mediterranean Sea. The water did not boil. It did not steam. It simply stopped existing. One moment the Mediterranean was there, home to billions of fish, surrounded by ancient cities and millions of people. The next moment, it was a hole in the earth, a massive crater of exposed rock and dead sea life. The cities along its coast crumbled into the void. Millions died in seconds. The message was clear. The Vethrani did not negotiate. They took. Earth surrendered. The first years of the occupation were the worst. The Vethrani did not see humans as people. They saw them as tools, as animals that could follow simple commands. They divided the population into work groups and assigned each group a task. Some humans mined for metals. Others built machines. Some were sent to farms that produced food not for humans, but for the Vethrani, who found certain earth crops pleasing to eat. Those who resisted were killed. Those who tried to escape were killed. Those who simply looked at a Vethrani overseer the wrong way were killed. Death was the answer to every problem. Maria Santos survived because she was useful. She had been an engineer before the invasion, and the Vethrani needed engineers. They needed humans who understood how to maintain the machines that humans were forced to build. So Maria was sent to Mine Colony 7, deep in what had once been northern Canada, to keep the drilling equipment running. The colony was a nightmare. Humans lived underground in cramped tunnels that were always too hot or too cold. They worked 16-hour shifts breaking rock and extracting ore. They ate paste that provided nutrition but no pleasure. They slept in bunks stacked 5 high, so close together that you could hear every cough, every sob, every nightmare. The Vethrani watched them always. Cameras and guards monitored every tunnel. Any sign of rebellion was met with immediate punishment. In the first month, Maria saw 20 people executed for various crimes. Speaking in human languages, drawing pictures, singing a song. The Vethrani wanted to erase everything that made humans human, but they made a mistake. They thought humans were simple, Maria noticed it first in the children. The colony had a small population of young ones, children who had been born just before the invasion or just after. The Vethrani did not care about them except as future workers. They let the adult humans tend to them between shifts, seeing no threat in such small creatures. One night, Maria walked past the children's section and heard something strange. A woman was speaking in a low voice, telling a story. It was an old story, a human story, about a hero who faced impossible odds and won through cleverness and courage. The children listened with wide eyes. The woman was Dr. Yuki Tanaka. She had been a physics professor before the invasion, one of the most brilliant minds on Earth. Now she shoveled ore like everyone else. But at night, when the cameras could not see and the guards were not watching, she taught. She taught the children to read, scratching letters in the dirt and erasing them before morning. She taught them mathematics using pebbles and hand signals. She taught them science, explaining how the universe worked in words simple enough for young minds to understand. And she taught them history, the true history of humanity, not the lies the Vethrani spread about human weakness and stupidity. Maria watched this for several nights before she approached. "They will kill you if they find out," she whispered. Dr. Tanaka looked at her with eyes that held no fear. "They've already killed us," she said. "They have taken our world, our culture, our dignity. What more can they take? Our knowledge? Our hope? Those things cannot be taken. They can only be given up. And I will never give them up." Maria understood then what Dr. Tanaka was doing. She was not just teaching children to read. She was planting seeds. Seeds that might take decades to grow. Seeds that the children would carry with them and pass to their own children someday. "How can I help?" Maria asked. Dr. Tanaka smiled. It was the first real smile Maria had seen since the invasion. "Teach them what you know," she said. "Engineering, machines, how things work and how they break. We cannot fight them now. Perhaps we cannot fight them ever. But we can remember. We can learn. And someday, someone will find a way." That night, Maria began teaching in secret. She showed children how circuits worked using rocks and sticks. She explained leverage and pressure and all the ways that small forces could move large objects. She taught them that knowledge was power, even when you had no power at all. The Vethrani never noticed. Why would they? Humans were just animals to them, too stupid to plan beyond their next meal. The idea that these creatures might be preparing something, might be thinking across generations, never occurred to them. In the darkness of Mining Colony 7, the first sparks of resistance began to glow. Not fire, not yet. Just sparks. Just memories. Just hope passed from one generation to the next like a secret flame. The Vethrani had taken humanity's world. They had not yet taken humanity's future. 70 years passed. The world Maria Santos had known was gone forever. The old cities lay in ruins, picked clean by Vethrani machines. The forests had been cut down for lumber. The oceans were drained of fish. Earth was a husk, a mine, a factory floor for its alien masters. Maria was dead now. She had lived to 63, which was old for a colony worker. In her final years, she had trained dozens of young engineers, passing on everything she knew about machines and physics and the secret art of breaking things in ways that looked like accidents. When she died, her students mourned her in silence. Open grief was forbidden, but her work continued. Dr. Tanaka had died even earlier, worn out by years of hard labor. Yet her legacy spread further than she could have imagined. The children she taught grew up and taught their own children. Those children taught others. By the time 70 years had passed, the Tanaka protocols were known in every human colony on Earth. The protocols were simple. Remember everything. Learn everything. Trust only other humans, and even then, trust carefully. Never show the Vethrani what you really are. Let them think you are broken. Let them think you have given up. And wait. Wait for the right moment. Kenji Okafor was born into this world of secret knowledge. His grandmother had learned from Dr. Tanaka herself. His mother had memorized more engineering texts than existed in any Vethrani database. And Kenji had grown up believing something that would have seemed insane to earlier generations, that humans would one day be free. He worked in the communications center of Colony 7, maintaining the equipment that let Vethrani overseers talk to each other and to the orbital platforms above. It was considered a trusted position, given only to humans who seemed completely obedient. The Vethrani did not know that Kenji understood their technology better than they did. The Vethrani were not inventors. This was the great secret that humans had discovered over decades of observation. The Vethrani had conquered their way across the galaxy, stealing technology from every species they defeated. Their ships were designed by a people they had enslaved 3,000 years ago. Their weapons came from another conquest, their medical equipment from another. The Vethrani themselves had not created anything new in millennia. They did not understand how their machines worked. They only knew how to use them. Humans were different. Humans looked at a machine and asked why. They took things apart in their minds and put them back together. They improved designs without permission, fixed problems the Vethrani did not even know existed. And they kept all of this knowledge hidden, sharing it only through the secret networks that connected every colony. Kenji had access to information that most humans never saw. His position let him monitor communications between the orbital platforms. He learned things that the Vethrani never meant for humans to know. The most important thing he learned changed everything. It began with a routine maintenance check. Kenji was repairing a damaged relay station when he noticed something odd in the data strings. Certain messages were heavily encrypted, far more protected than normal military communications. Curious, he made a copy of the encryption pattern and passed it along the network. It took 3 years for the network to break that encryption. Humans in 12 different colonies contributed pieces of the puzzle, each one working in secret on their tiny portion. When the code finally broke, Kenji was the first to read the messages inside. He sat in the maintenance closet and read them 3 times, making sure he understood. Then he sat very still for a long time. The Vethrani were dying, not from disease or war, but from something far simpler. They could not have children anymore. A genetic plague had struck their species 800 years ago, leaving every Vethrani alive sterile. Their scientists had failed to find a cure. Their only solution was to extend their existing lives, keeping each Vethrani alive for centuries through advanced medical technology. That technology required rare isotopes. Isotopes found primarily on Earth. The Vethrani had not conquered humanity for labor. Labor was a secondary benefit. They had conquered Earth because without Earth's resources, every Vethrani would be dead within 300 years. Kenji passed this information through the network. It spread from colony to colony, whispered in work songs and hidden in the patterns of woven cables. Within a year, every human on Earth knew the truth. The monsters who ruled them were desperate. They were afraid. They were vulnerable. For the first time in 70 years, humans began to plan not just for survival, but for freedom. The network that Dr. Tanaka had started grew larger and more organized. Each colony had its specialists now, people who understood different parts of Vethrani technology. Engineers knew every weakness of the mining equipment. Medical workers knew how the life extension treatments worked. Communication specialists like Kenji knew how the Vethrani talked to each other and how those conversations could be interrupted. They began to map everything. Every power generator on the planet. Every shield station on the orbital platforms. every warehouse where the precious isotopes were stored. They shared this information through songs and hand signals, through patterns scratched in dirt and erased before morning dawned. The Vethrani noticed nothing. They had grown comfortable in their dominance. Why would they suspect their slaves of planning anything? Humans were animals, useful for labor, but incapable of complex thought. The overseers barely watched anymore. This was their greatest mistake. A woman named Sarah Chun led the planning council. She had no official title, no special position in the colonies. She was just another worker, a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. But she had a gift for strategy that would have made her a general in the old world. Now she used that gift to plan the largest coordinated action in human history. "We cannot win a war," she told the council in secret meetings held in abandoned tunnels. "They have weapons that can destroy cities in seconds. They have ships that can bomb us from orbit. If we fight them directly, we die. Then what do we do?" Asked a young man named Marcus Webb, who worked in the primary communications hub. Sarah smiled. "We do not fight them. We make them need us. And then we stop giving them what they need." The plan took 5 years to prepare. Every human on Earth had to know their role. Every system that kept the Vethrani alive had to be understood and ready to fail at the right moment. And most importantly, the galaxy had to learn the truth about what was happening on Earth. The Vethrani had told the galactic community that humans were dangerous primitives who needed to be controlled for everyone's safety. Other species believed this lie because the Vethrani were powerful and humans were unknown. But the network had discovered something useful. The Vethrani communication system could reach far beyond Earth. With the right access, a message could be broadcast across the entire galaxy. Marcus Webb would be the one to send that message. His position gave him access to the primary hub. All he needed was time and a distraction. The distraction would be provided by every human on Earth, working together in perfect coordination. The day was set. The plan was ready. After 70 years of waiting, of learning, of passing hope from generation to generation, humanity was finally ready to act. Kenji Okafor stood at his workstation on the morning of the uprising. He looked the same as always, just another obedient worker maintaining alien equipment. But his hands were steady and his heart was calm. Today, everything would change. The day began like any other in the colonies. Workers woke at the sound of the morning alarm. They ate their paste in silence. They shuffled to their stations and began their tasks. The Vethrani overseers watched with bored eyes, expecting nothing unusual. At exactly noon, every human on Earth stopped moving. It happened all at once. Miners set down their tools. Factory workers stepped back from their machines. Medical staff stopped tending to Vethrani patients. Communications operators froze at their stations. 10 billion humans stood perfectly still and refused to work. The silence was terrifying. For 30 seconds, the Vethrani did nothing. They could not understand what they were seeing. Then the overseers began to shout. They screamed orders in their harsh language. They waved weapons and threatened death. Some of them fired warning shots into the air. The humans did not move. In Colony 7, a Vethrani commander marched up to a group of miners and grabbed one by the collar. It was an old man named Robert Jens, who had worked in the mines for 40 years. The commander held a plasma rifle to his head. "Work," the commander said. "Work or die." Robert looked at him with calm eyes. "No," he said. The commander shot him. Robert's body fell to the ground. The humans around him did not move. They did not scream or cry or run. They simply stood and waited. The commander shot another human, then another. Each time, the others remained still. After 15 deaths, the commander stopped. He was breathing hard, his 4 eyes wide with something the humans had never seen in a Vethrani. Before fear. The same scene, played out across the planet. Vethrani killed hundreds of humans in the first hour, but for every one they killed, 10 more stood firm. The overseers realized the terrible truth. They could not kill their entire workforce. They needed humans alive to run the machines, to mine the ore, to refine the isotopes that kept Vethrani hearts beating, and the humans were not working. The Vethrani commanders called for reinforcements. They ordered troops from the orbital platforms to descend and restore order. But when those orders were sent, something strange happened. The communication systems began to malfunction. Messages went to the wrong recipients. Coordinates were scrambled. Ships that tried to land found themselves directed to empty fields or dangerous mountain ranges. Kenji Okafor sat at his station, doing nothing obvious but watching his screens carefully. The subtle changes he had made over the past 5 years were working perfectly. He had not destroyed the communications network. That would have been noticed. Instead, he had inserted tiny delays, small redirections, minor errors that added up to chaos. The Vethrani could still talk to each other, but nothing worked quite right. By the time they realized the problem was inside their own systems, it would be too late. While the overseers scrambled to regain control, small teams of humans moved through the colonies. They looked like workers going about normal tasks, but their missions were precise. An engineer disabled the backup generator in Mining Colony 3. A technician removed a critical component from the water purification system in Colony 12. A maintenance worker adjusted the pressure in an isotope refinery, creating a slow leak that would take hours to notice. Nothing exploded. Nothing burned. Everything simply stopped working, piece by piece, in ways that looked like normal mechanical failure. The most important team moved through the primary communications hub, where Marcus Webb worked. They had waited years for this moment. While the Vethrani commanders focused on the surface problems, Marcus and his team began their real task. The hub contained the most powerful transmitter on Earth, capable of sending signals across the galaxy. The Vethrani used it to communicate with their homeworld and with other conquered species. Today, Marcus would use it to show the universe what the Vethrani really were. The team had prepared for this. They had thousands of hours of recordings gathered secretly over decades. Images of the slave camps, videos of mass executions, documents showing how the Vethrani had erased human culture and forced entire populations into labor. And most damning of all, the encrypted files proving that the Vethrani were a dying species, committing genocide to save themselves. Marcus worked quickly. The Vethrani would detect the broadcast eventually, but by then it would be too late. The signal was designed to scatter across multiple frequencies, bouncing through relay stations that would amplify it beyond any ability to stop. "Ready," said a woman named Anya, who had spent 10 years learning Vethrani programming languages. She had rewritten the transmission protocols to ensure the signal reached every corner of occupied space. Marcus looked at his team. They were all exhausted, all terrified, all determined. This was the moment everything had led to. "Send it," he said. The signal burst out from Earth like a scream. It carried images and sounds and data, compressed into tight packets that exploded across thousands of frequencies. Any species with basic radio technology would receive it. The message was simple. Look at what the Vethrani have done. Look at who they really are. For 6 hours, the broadcast continued. The Vethrani tried everything to stop it. They attacked the hub, but the doors had been sealed from inside. They tried to jam the signal, but it was scattered across too many frequencies. They tried to destroy the transmitter, but that would have crippled their own communications for months. They could do nothing but watch as their secrets spilled across the stars. The galactic community received the broadcast with shock. The Vethrani had always portrayed themselves as civilizers, bringing order to primitive species. Now the truth was clear. They were conquerors, slavers, murderers, and they were dying, desperate to steal from others what they could not create themselves. Species that had tolerated the Vethrani began to reconsider. Trade agreements were quietly suspended. Military alliances suddenly seemed less important. The Vethrani, who had ruled through fear and lies for millennia, found themselves alone. On Earth, the situation grew desperate for the occupiers. The orbital platforms had been cut off from accurate information. Their troops on the ground were scattered and confused. The humans had stopped working entirely now, even as the Vethrani killed more and more of them. Sarah Chun watched from her hidden location as reports came in from across the planet. The plan was working. The Vethrani were panicking, but she knew this was only the beginning. The uprising would force the Vethrani to negotiate, but negotiations could fail. The humans needed to maintain pressure, to show their captors that Earth would never be productive again under their rule. The next phase began at sunset. Humans, who had been standing still all day, began to move. They walked out of the colonies, away from the mines and factories and refineries. They walked into the wilderness, into the ruins of old cities, into places the Vethrani could not easily follow. They took nothing with them except the knowledge in their heads. The Vethrani found themselves alone in their colonies, surrounded by machines they did not understand and could not operate. The isotope refineries needed constant human attention. Without it, they would degrade and fail. The mining equipment required maintenance that only human engineers could provide. Every system on Earth depended on human hands, and those hands were gone. Commander Vex, the highest-ranking Vethrani on Earth, stood in the empty control room of Colony 7 and stared at the dark screens. He had received word from the homeworld. The broadcast had been seen everywhere. The Vethrani hegemony was facing the greatest political crisis in its history. His orders were simple: get the humans working again by any means necessary. But how? He could not catch 10 billion people. He could not force them to work when they were willing to die rather than obey. He could not replace them with machines because the Vethrani did not know how to build or maintain such machines. For the first time in his long life, Commander Vex understood that he had lost. The humans had not defeated him with weapons. They had defeated him with patience, with coordination, with a willingness to sacrifice that he could not match. He picked up a communication device and opened a channel to the human network. After 70 years of conquest, the Vethrani finally had something to say to humanity. "We would like to discuss terms," he said. The negotiations took place in the ruins of Geneva, where the old unified government of Earth had once met. Commander Vex arrived with a small guard, looking older and more tired than any Vethrani should. Sarah Chun came with a delegation of humans chosen from colonies around the world. They sat across from each other at a broken table in a building that had not been used in 70 years. "Your broadcast has caused problems," Commander Vex said. His voice was flat, but Sarah could see the anger in his 4 eyes. "The galactic community has turned against us. Our trade routes are blocked. Our allies have abandoned us." "Good," Sarah said simply. The commander's jaw tightened. "You do not understand. Without the isotopes from Earth, our species will die. You have doomed billions of Vethrani to extinction." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "You killed billions of humans. You erased our cultures. You worked our people to death in your minds. And now you expect sympathy because you faced the same fate you gave us?" The room was silent. Commander Vex had no answer. "We are not monsters," Sarah continued. "We do not want your species to die. But we will not save you at the cost of our own freedom. These are our terms. Listen carefully, because we will not negotiate." The terms were clear. All Vethrani would leave Earth within 1 year. They would remove their orbital platforms, their weapons, and their soldiers. They would provide humanity with copies of all technology they had taken from conquered species throughout history. They would pay reparations in resources and materials to help rebuild Earth, and they would give humanity a voice in the galactic community. Full recognition as a sovereign species with all the rights that came with it. Commander Vex listened to each demand with growing despair. "You asked for everything," he said. "You took everything," Sarah replied. "Consider it fair exchange," the commander argued. He threatened. He offered compromises that would have left the Vethrani in partial control. Sarah rejected them all. She had spent decades planning for this moment. She knew exactly how much leverage humanity held, and she intended to use every bit of it. Finally, Commander Vex asked the question that had been haunting him since the uprising began. "How?" he said. "How did you do this? You were broken. You were obedient. Our overseers reported no signs of resistance for generations." Sarah smiled. "Your overseers only saw what we wanted them to see. Every act of obedience was a performance. Every show of despair was theater. We were never broken, Commander. We were waiting. Waiting for what? For you to grow comfortable. For you to stop watching. For you to forget that humans are dangerous." She leaned forward. "You thought our short lives made us weak. You thought we could not plan beyond our own survival. But we pass our knowledge to our children, Commander. We remember across generations. We think in centuries." Commander Vex stared at her. In that moment, he understood something that no Vethrani had grasped before. Humans were not primitives who had gotten lucky. They were patient predators who had been hunting the Vethrani for 70 years without making a single move that revealed their true intentions. He agreed to the terms. The withdrawal took 11 months. Vethrani ships lifted off from Earth one by one, carrying soldiers and overseers and administrators who had grown used to thinking of humans as property. The orbital platforms detached and began their long journey home. By the end of the year, not a single Vethrani remained in the Sol system. The first generation of free humans looked up at a sky without shadows for the first time in their lives. Rebuilding was hard. The Vethrani had taken so much. Cities needed to be rebuilt. Forests needed to be replanted. Oceans needed to be restocked with life. But humans had always been good at building, and now they had access to technology far beyond what they had possessed before the invasion. Within 10 years, Earth had stabilized. Farms grew real food again. Children went to schools where human history was taught openly. Artists created works that had been forbidden for generations. The cultural traditions that had survived in whispers and secret songs came back into the light. But the humans who led this reconstruction were not the same as those who had surrendered 70 years before. They thought differently now. They planned for longer. They trusted less and prepared more. The trauma of the occupation had changed humanity at a fundamental level. They began to build ships. Not warships, though they had those too. They built exploration vessels, colony ships, trading craft. Within 50 years, humanity had established settlements on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter, in asteroid belts rich with resources. They expanded outward with the same patient determination that had won their freedom. The galactic community watched with mixed feelings. Some species welcomed humanity as a valuable new member. Others feared what these former slaves might become. The Vethrani had been powerful, and humans had brought them down without firing a single weapon in the traditional sense. What might humans do to others? Sarah Chun, old now but still sharp, addressed these concerns at the first galactic summit humanity attended. She stood before representatives of 100 species and spoke simply. "We did not seek revenge against the Vethrani," she said. "We could have destroyed their isotope supplies and condemned them to immediate extinction. We chose not to. We could have demanded their surrender and occupied their worlds. We chose not to. We wanted only our freedom and our future. That is all we have ever wanted." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces both familiar and strange. "But hear me clearly. We will never be conquered again. We will never be slaves again. We will never allow another species to take what is ours. If anyone here is considering such actions, I suggest you study what happened to the Vethrani very carefully." The message was received. Over the next 2 centuries, humanity became one of the most influential species in the galaxy. They did not achieve this through military conquest. They achieved it through what they had always done best: innovation, adaptation, and the patient accumulation of knowledge and power. They improved Vethrani technology and shared those improvements with former slaves of the hegemony. They established trade networks that made other species dependent on human goods and services. They formed alliances based on mutual benefit rather than fear. Slowly, steadily, they built an economic and political position that no single species could challenge. The Vethrani, meanwhile, continued their decline. The galactic blockade had lifted after a few decades, but the damage was done. Their reputation was destroyed. Their trading partners had found other suppliers. The isotopes they needed existed elsewhere, but no one would sell to them at reasonable prices. Their life extension technology began to fail as resources ran out. The last generation of Vethrani was born 300 years after Earth's liberation. They grew up as refugees, scattered across worlds that tolerated them but never trusted them. They learned about their ancestors' crimes in schools where human teachers sometimes taught. They lived knowing that their species would end with them. Some humans pitied them. Some felt satisfaction. Most simply did not think about the Vethrani at all anymore. History had moved on, and humanity had more important things to consider than a dying race of former conquerors. On the anniversary of liberation, now a holiday celebrated across all human worlds, people gathered to remember. They told stories of the occupation, of the secret networks, of the men and women who had passed hope from generation to generation. They honored the names of those who had died: Maria Santos, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Robert Jens, and millions of others who had not lived to see freedom. And they remembered the lesson of those dark years. Strength was not just about weapons. It was about patience. It was about thinking beyond your own lifetime. It was about being willing to sacrifice today for a victory that might not come for generations. The Vethrani had thought humans were weak because they died so quickly. They had not understood that human lives were links in a chain that stretched across centuries. Each person carried the knowledge of those who came before and passed it to those who would come after. Individuals might die, but the chain continued. In the end, the Vethrani did not die violently. They faded. The last of them passed away on a medical station orbiting a forgotten moon, tended by nurses who barely remembered why anyone should care about Vethrani history. It was a quiet end to a species that had once terrorized the galaxy. Humanity noticed. They recorded the date in their histories. And then they moved on. There were stars to explore. There were discoveries to make. There were new challenges to face with the same patient determination that had saved them from extinction. On Earth, now green and alive again, children played in parks built on the ruins of old colonies. They did not remember the occupation except as stories their grandparents told. To them, freedom was simply normal. It was the way things had always been, but their teachers made sure they understood. Every generation learned the truth about what their ancestors had endured and how they had won. Every child grew up knowing that freedom was not given. It was earned. It was fought for. It was kept through vigilance and sacrifice. The Vethrani had taken humanity's world. They had tried to take humanity's future. They had failed because they underestimated what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction, in the great archives of Earth. A simple inscription marked the entrance to the Hall of Remembrance. It contained 4 words that summarized everything humanity had learned from its darkest hour. We remember. We endure. And across the stars, in every corner of the galaxy where humans had spread, that lesson was taught and remembered and passed on to the next generation. It would continue forever, or at least for as long as humans existed to remember. The stars belonged to those patient enough to claim them. Humanity had proven patient indeed.